a live picture, of course, but I always like to give you something to imagine while you hear my voice. So to recap, the goals of this class are to give students access to up-to-date tech, up-to-date information about technology in regards to law practice. A second goal is to inform law faculty about the changing nature of law practice so that it can inform their teaching. And then the third goal is to create an enduring resource that we can build on for future audiences, future versions of this class, or folks that come along later and would have liked to have attended but could not. And the solution that we chose to meet those goals is a MOOC, a massive open online course. Now, massive is a relative thing. There's over 700 people registered for this class. Quite a few of you showed up last week and are now showing up this week. That's wonderful. Thanks if you're coming back. If you're listening to this on the recording, that's just fine as well. That's what the online part makes possible, watching or attending this class anytime, anywhere.
Hey,
so
John?
The homework wiki, go ahead. Austin?
Don't forget to show your screen. There you go.
Can you see my screen now?
Yep.
Well, that's always disconcerting. But anyhow, I won't go back over everything, but I will back up to at least a picture of myself and move forward from there. So the homework wiki, and the reason why I bring up the homework wiki again is I was so delighted to see all the homeworks that you did. Great job. You guys did a fantastic job. Over 100 of you completed the homework. Don't the rest of you think that you're off the hook. If you didn't do the homework, you've still, you can still get in there and do that. Let me toggle over to the homework pages. And as you can see, this is what we asked people to do was to put their name under the last letter of their last name, the letter of their last name, and then to put a little dash one when they completed the homework. Now, I'm not going to point anybody out except one person, because I just wanted you to see how, if you didn't do the homework, what could be done here. Now, the reason why I bring up Shannon Brown is she did such a wonderful job not only of completing the homework, but went the extra step of creating an unofficial step-by-step instructions for adding your name to the alphabetical list. Shannon, I wanted to thank you. I've had a few people who were a little bit confused, and so I pointed them to your homework assignment, and that saved me some effort. Much appreciated. A couple of other things that we used the wiki for. There were a lot of questions asked that we didn't have time to get to, and so we dumped them to the wiki, and Stephanie Kimbrough was so kind to come back and answer all of those questions, or almost all those questions, the ones that she could. And so almost all of this is her work. I went through afterwards and added some links to where she mentioned cases or had links to other websites. So all your questions hopefully got answered in that space. Thank you for that, Stephanie. I think you might be online and listening. Of course, her slides and the video was posted to the blog within hours after the course. And she also gave us a free copy of Chapter 6 from her book, Virtual Law Practice. Chapter 6 was on ethics and malpractice issues. Thank you for that. Back to my PowerPoint. If you haven't taken the pre-course survey, it's linked through from the course blog, so please do. It tells us a little bit more about you. It's a very short survey, and it gives us, it asks the most important question, is what are your expectations? We're very much creating this as we go in the spirit of the MOOC, and this being the first time we've done a course like this. And so we'd love to hear what your expectations are. We will be surveying you post-course as well to see if we met those expectations or if we met other expectations. So it's a little bit of that need to know what you were thinking before so that we can measure against what you think afterwards. Please do take that survey. Now, if you have questions, you can pop them into the question box. I've got staff who are will either answer them right away if they're something that can be answered right away, or will feed them back to me so that after the presentation I can give them to I can verbalize them to Marc Lauritsen, and and then those we can't get to, we'll put back into the wiki and beg Marc to come back if there are things for him to answer, or we'll figure out something to get him answered ourselves, or we'll open them up to the crowd. Since it's a wiki, anybody in the class who could provide that information can do that work. That's the spirit of the MOOC. So this week's class is on document automation with Marc Lauritsen. Marc is, I can't think of a better person to give this class. Marc is truly an expert in this space. He's the president of Capstone Practice Systems. He's a lawyer. He's an educator. I've worked with him on projects. I consider him a friend and a colleague. He's done amazing work with the legal aid organizations on training them in the use of document automation, specifically with hot docs. He's written a book called The Lawyer's Guide to Working Smarter with Knowledge Tools, which we've linked to from the blog. At least I hope we have. If we haven't, I'll fix that. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn the thing over to Marc and have him start his presentation. Austin, you can change the presenter.
Thank you very much, John, and I want to give my congratulations to you for masterminding this amazing course, which I'm not only teaching in, but trying to take as much as possible. Let me just bring up my own slides, and I'm going to try to spend about 30 minutes addressing the topic I've been assigned, which is document automation. Giving an overview, this is a huge topic. We could easily spend a full course or two just on this. And the segments of the presentation will include a sort of a summary of forms of document automation. What do we mean by that term? Then I'm going to drill down more specifically to document assembly, which is a specialized subset that I think is especially strategically important for law students, lawyers, and anyone else concerned about the legal services delivery system. I'm going to give a couple examples, one live, actually running and showing you how a complex system can be built to discharge huge amounts of what had previously been tedious lawyer and legal secretary work. Then talk about various frontiers. Where do we stand in terms of this technology? And there's some frontiers both in terms of technology, education, and theory. Near the end, talk about career implications for people that are presently in a legal education context, getting ready to become a lawyer or be involved in this industry, and then give you links for ways to go deeper yourself, in addition to the homework that John is assigning you. So, document automation is not exactly a well understood, clearly defined term. I find it useful to think of it as composing three main branches. One are technologies that are used to assist the creation of documents. Another branch has to do with technologies that assist in analyzing existing documents in various ways. And the third branch is managing documents. Once they already exist, how do we deal with them? How do we keep track of them and find them, etc.? And then these branches, in turn, have sub-branches. So creation, for instance, I think there's two main areas of interest. One is a whole raft of tools that people can use to assist in generating documents. I'll get back to this in a second, but word processing and various other kinds of power tools for creating documents. Then there's this subcategory of semi-autonomous document generation tools, automatic assembly. And that's where, in fact, I'll spend most of this talk today. But in the other branches, in the analysis branch, one form of that is what you might refer to as disassembly, where you're taking a document or a whole repository of documents and you're deconstructing it into its constituent parts for the sake of analysis and actually to guide future document creation. Now, we're going to hear from Kingsley Martin later in this course about one variant of that, so we're not going to spend too much time on it. Another form of analysis is taking an existing document and validating it against some standard or some other document. So you need to inspect its properties, its structure, its contents, and compare and contrast it against some standard. And then the third branch of analysis, which is not really commercially available very much yet, but a lot of cutting-edge work is going on in the academic world, is taking a document that exists and not merely structurally disassembling it or deconstructing it, but parsing it for its meaning, to tease out exactly what's the propositional content of the document, what rights and obligations are being expressed by the words, what are the parties agreeing to, what normative content is contained in the document. Very interesting, and I think a form we're going to see in the future that I'm not going to get into today. Then on the management side, one branch is simply managing the content itself, storing it, retrieving it, allowing people to search. As you may or may not know, this is ubiquitous in law practice and almost any business setting nowadays, is to have a document management system that enables you to control the huge quantities of texts that need to be created and accessed in the course of a professional or a business operation. And that's a vast industry of its own that's not going to be covered in this talk. And a subsidiary or adjacent part of that is managing the rights and obligations that are contained in your documents. This is what would be called contract management software. And all of these pieces interact with each other, so commonly any one of these aspects of document automation is contained in environments where you've got others going on as well. One other high-level look at this field. Document management you can think of as a subset of content management. So content management is a broader notion. In enterprise content management systems, you can manage emails and videos and audio and voicemails and all kinds of content, which in turn can be seen as a subset of knowledge management. So if you think of the biggest circle here is all the knowledge and sort of information sloshing around in an organization. Content is one big part of it. One big part of content is documents. And then within documents, you've got routine documents of various kinds, books and memos and articles and letters and all that kind of stuff. You've got specialized subsets like contracts that are actually executed agreements that have legal significance but still exist and are embodied as documents. And another subset is managing the templates that an organization might use, the models, the blueprints they may use for creating contracts and other kinds of documents. So I think it's helpful just to think of the context in which all these technologies live. So I mentioned the analysis branch. Here are just three quick examples of technologies that do this. One is Kayak, that you'll be hearing a lot more from Kingsley Martin. Extremely robust, sophisticated tools that can take a whole universe of documents in an organization, say 1,000 merger agreements, and very quickly deconstruct them and detect their typicality so that somebody creating a new one can look back and say, aha, we almost always have a governing law clause, and this is how it's structured. You'll hear a lot more about that later. Redacto is a new player that's doing something similar, where you can upload, as you can with Kayak, an existing contract or document and take advantage of this automatic analysis. And then a somewhat older technology that's been around for a while, but that illustrates this category is DealProof. It's now owned by Thomson Reuters. But this is a advanced technology that can take an existing document and kind of go beyond spell checking or grammar checking to check some of the substantive validity of the document. Have you got defined terms for all the terms that you've defined? Do you use the words properly in different contexts? So enough on analysis. Let me get back to the document creation branch. And I mentioned there were two branches here. One is what you might think of as power steering. These are tools that enable somebody who needs to be creating a document to do it faster, better, cheaper than the old ways. Now, of course, we've had word processing for a couple of decades now, so that's kind of familiar and taken for granted. But it's useful to remind ourselves that it's got a lot of computational power built into it. It handles tasks like automatically numbering paragraphs and cross-references, keeping them current, building tables of contents, building tables of citations, etc., handling spell check, grammar check, quite sophisticated document comparison. Back in the 60s and 70s, lawyers would be paid good money to sit and, with a red pencil, actually redline differences between two versions of a document. That now has been handed off to the machine, and it does a better, faster job much more efficiently. And so you can use these tools and things like search and replace and various kinds of macros and styles to streamline the production of documents you need. You can access clause libraries, collections of pre-built, prefabricated components, and just grab them and snap them into your documents. So this, I think, has become kind of a baseline for many people, especially in law, who are doing legal work, legal document work, is to at least take advantage of these kind of power tools. Document assembly you can think of as moving from power steering up to a chauffeur. And this is where you've got the machine not simply being a tool in your hand, but a semi-autonomous agent, an intelligent assistant that interacts with you for the sake of creating a document. And for those that aren't familiar with it, especially outside of law, a familiar example is TurboTax. And that kind of captures the basic idea. You've got a piece of software that understands what information, what numbers and names and pieces of information need to go where in a document, and it provides an interface through which the user can answer questions and fill in forms, and then construct necessary documents that are properly configured. And we see this in a whole variety of forms and venues, which I'll cover some of. Sometimes it's simply a add into your word processor, kind of a word processing on steroids that can do this for you. Increasingly, there are standalone applications that can be bought or built. Often this is constructed into a case management system, so in addition to managing the data and tasks and commitments involving in handling a case, that very data can be used to compose letters and pleadings and reports and other kinds of documents. And of course, a lot of people are familiar with interactive PDFs where you're simply answering questions inside an interface that looks like the document, and it automatically handles some aspects of computing numbers and other aspects for you. A quick history. This has been obviously for lawyers who deal with documents all the time of great interest for a long time. Back in the 70s, there was a lot of research and experimentation, even with some early paper systems, where literally people would take cardboard cutouts of documents and use them to construct assembled documents for a new transaction. By the 80s, there were the explosion of word processors, of course, and tools in them to do this work, some commercial document automation platforms. A lot of pioneers were experimenting. The American Bar Association had a special interest group. At one point, we had, I think, over 1,200 members who were very enthusiastic. The 90s, continued explosion of platforms, more publishers coming into the market, actually building pre-constructed content for this, and a lot of ongoing evangelism, but still pretty much islands of adoption. By the 2000s, this became more mainstream. One product, Hot Docs, became pretty much a dominant player, but some very strong competitors have arisen and continue to arise. And of course, the web became a new mode of delivery. So the basic concepts are pretty simple. The idea generally in these approaches is to have a template, which is a kind of a model document that expresses the logic of not a single document, but a class of documents. So under what circumstances should we include these parts of a document, put these words where, how do we construct a transaction-specific instance of this model? And that involves what you can call variables. Those are the pieces of information that differ from transaction to transaction, names, dates, numbers, words, various calculations you perform upon that information, so to compute pronouns and totals and appropriate computed dates, etc. Then you've got in your document various forms of logic which capture the conditionality. You know, what phrases, what words or sentences, paragraphs, or entire documents need to be included or not based upon the factual circumstances and the user's guidance, the user's decisions. And the idea of repetition. So if you've got, if you're doing a divorce and you've got 5 kids, you need to have the section that enumerates the children repeated 5 times, one for each child or one for each piece of property involved. But the combination of variables, conditionality, basically if-then, and repetition enable you to do almost an arbitrarily complex document, to model how it should behave under different factual circumstances. And the last piece is to put some front end, some interface on this template that interacts with a user, to present them with questions and give them guidance along the way. One way to capture this is the idea that the template produces an interview, some experience with the user that enables them to answer questions and specify the facts. And then upon assembling that, you produce a document or a form or a whole collection of them. And optionally also an answer file, a collection of data that can be used to go back, change your answers, and regenerate documents, or to come back later in the process and generate other documents. But the essence of document assembly, I think, is captured in this basic schematic. A few differences to remember. There's the template that's different, of course, from the answers, and it's different from the resulting documents. So you've got these three interacting pieces that are typically in play. You've got an interview experience, which is the user's engagement with the questions and decisions. And then you've got an assembly process that takes the results of that interview and runs it against the template and produces a resultant document or a set of documents. You can generate out of these kind of systems both editable documents that can be opened up in Word or Google Docs or something and worked with, or graphical forms that are really fixed format that are designed not to be editable and can be printed or filed with PDF. And then nowadays, this can happen either on the desktop entirely or in a web-based online mode. I think for most people, the benefits are relatively obvious. Basic motivation is being able to do good work with less effort. You're handing off to machines mechanically accomplishable tasks about documents. That helps to ensure various forms of quality, completeness, consistency, correctness. And thereby, as a professional, you can be more responsive to your clients, to circumstances. But there's also side benefits. The users of these systems get trained. They learn by using. They can be supported. It becomes kind of a knowledge management, a knowledge support tool. An office can consolidate its expertise in a single system. It can improve its processes just by the fact of building these systems, because it requires deep analysis and engineering of your work processes to build an appropriate technology. And last but not least, it makes work a lot easier and more satisfying and enriching. As a young associate in a law firm or a government office, if you have a system like this, you're spending less time dealing with administrivia, and you're actually focusing on substance and creativity. Wide range of uses. On the document-focused side, as I mentioned, you can produce these word processable documents or graphical forms. You can also produce what you might think of as a personalized pamphlet or instructions, where it's not meant to be edited, but it's a highly customized set of guidance for a user that takes into account their circumstances and tells them what to do. You can also build applications that are entirely interview-focused, which are there for the sake of just using this dynamic questioning ability these platforms provide, act as intelligent checklists or analytical advisors, help people assess their eligibility for various government benefits or business opportunities, and they might be used in the hand of somebody who's on a phone, who's an advocate for somebody else. I'm going to switch to a live example, and I like to use one that's one of my favorites. This is a direct descendant of a system I first began writing way back in 1986. And I had been, as John mentioned, I think I had been a poverty lawyer, a legal services lawyer, and a law school clinical teacher. And one of the areas I practiced in was eviction defense work. And a typical case would involve some tenant coming to our office with a complaint in their hands, being evicted, and needing to file a response in the court, an answer, often on very short notice. And as a Massachusetts eviction defense lawyer, there was a whole raft of defenses and claims available to us to help slow down the process. And so I would sit down and on a yellow pad sketch out my document. This was even in the days before word processing for lawyers. And hand to my secretary. Would go back and forth a few times and probably spend 5 or 6 hours together producing the package of documents needed. So when in the 80s I became aware of some technologies for doing this better, I got very interested. And let me see if I can quickly find my example. So this is the direct descendant of that early work. It's a eviction defense system, and I'm showing this because it illustrates some important concepts. The idea is you've got we're in the interview, you've got a whole outline of topics. So I can navigate through and characterize my tenant's name and gender and all kinds of other information that might be important or necessary to configure an appropriate legal response. So we need to know about the parties and the court we're in, and whether we're demanding a jury trial, etc. What's the nature of the tenancy? When did it start? What's the rent? Why am I being evicted? Are there any violations of the sanitary code that have been present in the apartment that might justify withholding of rent, etc., etc. So I would navigate through this kind of a system, characterize the facts, and then I get to my legal decisions. What defenses do I want to assert? So the whole range of defenses that I might want to assert are available here in a pick and choose format. Ones that are appropriate for the circumstances based upon the facts I've entered are highlighted. So the system's got some intelligence in it. So it's not simply presenting me a static list of questions and information and options, but it's dynamically assembling its very interface. It's dynamically building this engagement with me as a professional to advise and support me. And if I'm curious about how a particular defense I'm thinking of asserting looks, I can just immediately bring up exactly how it will appear in this context and the associated supporting law. So I find this just, even though I've worked with this for years, I still kind of stand in awe of the ability of people to embody their expertise in a system like this. I'm not going to dwell in here too long, but you'd work through your various defenses, same thing for claims, counterclaims you might want to assert, and based upon both your facts and your choices, various subsidiary questions come up. So the system maintains knowledge about what it needs to know. It drills down and gathers information needed. And then I may have various discovery requests. I'm propounding interrogatories or requests for documents. Once again, it's giving me options and it's giving me guidance about what to include. And then when I get ready to compile my documents, I've got a universe of documents I can build. And just for the heck of it here, I'm going to choose all of these today. And this is where, in the old days, and even frankly in the new days when someone does not have a system like this, to generate a high-quality, complete set of documents like this, with all your letters and pleadings and other kinds of documentation necessary to do a good legal job, is going to be at least a couple hours of work. And people would typically find the most common similar transaction before, bring up the documents, cut and paste, adjust it, search and replace, fool around with it, and finally get the set they want after a few reviews. With document assembly, if I click Finish here, and if the demo gods are with me today, I get a chance. Obviously, I've changed my answers, so I'm going to save my answers. And now, in about 2 seconds, I've gotten my resulting set. As soon as Word catches up here, we'll see we have 49 pages of documentation that's been generated. And this is really a high-quality rendition of all the pleadings and documents with proper dates and names and numbers and all the paragraphs numbered properly and the defenses numbered that's been built out for me. So I am, as a practitioner, residing kind of on the surface. I'm living in the world of concept and judgment, not in the world of hacking content and texts. The machine is doing its work for me. So let me put that away and not bother saving it because I can regenerate that almost instantaneously. Okay, so that was a concrete example. Now, these systems can be used in many different modes, as I said. One way to look at this is sort of who's using it. You can have people that are using these by themselves.
Marc?
System is, yes, John.
Marc? So
Yes.
just before you get past that, what was the tool that you used to do that with?
Oh, in that case, that was Hot Docs. That system was originally written in a product called CAPS, which is no longer a viable commercial tool, but it's been migrated to Hot Docs.
Good. I just wanted to make sure that people knew that. Thanks.
Sure. And that is in use today in at least one or two legal aid programs. I'm not personally working on it much anymore, but it still makes a great demo. So on the service spectrum, we've got scenarios where people use this by themselves, do-it-yourself systems that are built. On one extreme, we've got people who are professionals that are doing it on behalf of others. And as we heard from Stephanie last week, there are many scenarios where you're sort of combining it, where you're unbundling services and you're engaging both the client and the professional in service delivery. So you can think of traditional service kind of looking like this, where you've got a client coming in, they're not really equipped with technology or not engaged with it, but they're interacting with a professional who in turn interacts with systems, maybe in the cloud. On the self-help side, you've got that professional or somebody else who's built tools, put them in the cloud, and then they're being used by the self-helper without any contemporaneous interaction with the human. And then there's these in-between, sometimes referred to as co-production scenarios, where both things are happening. You've got both a professional and a self-helper / client engaging collaboratively with tools to help get the legal work done. And they're also interacting with each other. And document assembly can be used in all three of those modes. There's a lot of activity on the web, as you might imagine, from pure online forums, which are just collections of content, static content you can download, and maybe persuade yourself that it's useful as is. That's become a commodity. There are document preparation services, like LegalZoom being the most prominent example, that takes it a step further, where they actually elicit information from you and construct documents at your behest that may use document automation behind the scenes, but not interactively with the customer. There are various websites that provide online document automation, either on a commercial basis or on a charitable basis. And I've got three here: ICANN, Rocket Lawyer, and My Lawyer. I just want to give you a quick example of one of these that John and I and others have been involved with, say in the nonprofit sector again. This is say you're an Illinois tenant who's trying to get your security deposit back. So you navigate to a Illinois Legal Aid online website. You decide you want to send a letter to the lawyer or to the landlord. You're taken to this website called Law Help Interactive, which is a free national service for people who can't afford private attorneys. And you see where you're going into a security deposit complaint and summons. Okay, that sounds good. You obviously have to agree to various terms, make clear that you don't understand yourself to be getting legal advice or having a lawyer-client relationship, and say, yep, I agree to that. And then you engage in this kind of front end. We'll hear a lot more about this. This is the A to J author environment that John and Ron Stout, who's going to be speaking later, have engineered. Very nice, user-friendly environment. And the user in this case, once they identify their gender, they become an avatar in the scene. They walk down the path. But along the way, they're answering questions, the same kind of questions I was doing in my eviction example. And they're getting feedback, they're getting guidance, they're getting direction from an automated system. In this case, we've been told, that you have the option as a tenant to claim double damages, perhaps, and you need to decide that. And eventually, after about 41 screens, you get to the stairs of the courthouse, and you're told you can get your complaint. And this is where, upon clicking here, with another screen or two intervening, the document assembly magic happens. So that information has been taken, it's been run against the template on the website, and it produces this customized complaint. I've left a deliberate typo on the screen here. You see it says Jane Doe is a resident of Cook County. And this just illustrates that these applications are punctiliously verbatim. I mean, they do exactly what the programmer tells them. In this case, someone assumed who wrote this that when you answered what county you were in, you were just going to say the word Cook. You wouldn't say Cook County. And therefore, they put the word county in the underlying template, with the result that you get the double word county. That's easily programmable to detect what the user has written, but it just illustrates that it's a machine, it's a program, and it's only as infallible as the humans who have created it. So going back to the web examples, we talked about all these online sites like the one I just showed you that involves no contemporaneous lawyer, no contemporaneous professional service. But now we're getting some hybrid models which bundle them together. So Stephanie talked about Total Attorneys, which she uses for her virtual practice. That has some document automation in it that can provide interactivity between a client and a lawyer. Direct Law is an alternative to that. That's got quite sophisticated document assembly capacity and lots of pre-built content. And Legal Genie is a good example in the nonprofit sector where the legal aid program in Orange County, California, has partnered with a bar referral service so that consumers can buy a fixed price legal service, be taken through an interactive, intelligent questionnaire and document production system, and then get, as part of the process, not a free, but a paid consultation with the attorney, all as part of the same fixed price. Very innovative. I think it's a model for what many of us will be seeing in the future. And not to skip LegalZoom, they're now trying to do this as well, offering this kind of combined practice where they're not simply preparing documents for you and trying to organize themselves so they don't cross the line into unauthorized practice, but actually providing a connection to an attorney who will prepare and file your documents for you. So John asked about the platform. I mentioned HotDocs, but over the last 20 years, there have been literally 70 or more commercially offered document assembly engines aimed at the legal market. And I've got just some of these here. It's getting to the point where it's hard to come up with a new name because they've all been used. Like Doc Doolittle is one of my favorites. The ones in green are the ones that are surviving. So we still have Active Docs and Deal Builder, now known as Contract Express, Exari, HotDocs, Pythagoras. These are all still around to some degree, but there's been a lot of attrition. And that's one thing you need to think about as you consider dipping your toe into this is the platform you're going to learn from and invest in one that's going to survive. My company gets a lot of work these days advising law firms and law departments and other players how to choose a platform. And very often it comes down to something looking like this, where you've got 4 vendors, A, B, C, D, for instance, and there's various differentiators that you care about. And of course, how much you care about them are peculiar to your circumstances. So in this particular example, it turns out that Platform A doesn't support creation of PDFs at all, hardly. And one of them is really good, the others are okay. But this particular organization didn't care very much. So when you do a weighted summary, a weighted total of these things, that wouldn't make much difference. Whereas basic question and answer assembly, this is pretty standard. They're all about the same, very important but not differentiating. So it's one way to kind of systematically compare. And we've discovered literally hundreds of these kinds of differentiators that one organization or another may care about, and it's quite a task to distill it down to a simple answer. One thing this showing out here clearly is we're just showing the top of the scale, but these are incredibly close, even though they seem somewhat different here. They only differed by about 5%. So we've got a very robust marketplace with incredibly useful, powerful document assembly tools. And it's kind of against my commercial interest, but I very often advise people just pick one and put your energy into building useful tools. Don't spend your time deliberating too much about platforms. So where are we going? The technology is amazingly complete, complex, sophisticated. Almost anything you can imagine wanting to do now with document assembly applications can be done pretty cost effectively. And it's a real scandal that so much of law practice still proceeds without this being in place. But I think it has to do with various inhibitors and peculiarities about lawyers' psychologies and the structure of the legal market that up until now has kept this somewhat in the backwater. But looking forward, there's even more room for growth. I have a paper at the end called Frontiers in Document Assembly that goes into this in more depth, but we've only dipped our toe into various forms of interactive collaborative systems online, where it's not a one person at a time, but you've got several people collaborating around the construction of a document. Maybe a lawyer and a client, or maybe a party and a counterparty, or maybe several different people in a given organization who have different forms of expertise. Multi-mode systems is another frontier. This is, as I mentioned before, there's kind of 2 branches of document assembly. One is clause picking, where you've got a organization of components and you go grab and you kind of construct a template from the ground up. The other is this question and answer document assembly mode, which is taking a model, a template, and applying it to a set of answers. Most people want to do both. You want to be able to generate a document and have it open in Word or your preferred word processor and hand edit it and dump stuff into it and then switch back into automatic assembly and kind of seamlessly go back and forth. That's an important frontier right now that some progress is being made on. By mixed initiative, I just mean where there's more balance between the human and the artificial agent of the software. Right now, the software kind of sits there and displays questions, but it's certainly possible and desirable for an intelligent document assembly system to speak up and prompt you and say, wait a second, I noticed you did this. Maybe you meant this. Or wait, you've made these following choices, and I would recommend under these circumstances that you let me take the controls for a second and go back and fix these other documents that now are not consistent with your choices. And longitudinality is my fancy word simply for systems that survive the initial assembly process. So you don't want a document assembly system simply to guide you through the first draft. You want it to last throughout the life of a contract, the life of a document. And so downstream, as it's being managed, it retains the intelligence that you built into it. It retains the knowledge about the connections between the moving parts. You can read more about that if that strikes you as interesting. On the educational side, John and Ron Stout and I and others have been pushing this idea of apps for justice, which is basically the notion that law students should have the opportunity to learn how to build these kinds of applications as part of their education. And that's motivated both by the desire to give them practical skills they can use in their practice or set them up for new career paths where they actually work for an organization as a knowledge engineer rather than a practitioner. But it also provides a way to dig deep into an area of substance or procedure, because in order to model it, in order to construct an application in an area of practice, you've got to understand it much more deeply than perhaps just writing a memo about that area might accomplish. And finally, this acquaints lawyers and law students with how technology works. And frankly, even though most lawyers now are pretty competent using technology, many of us are oblivious to what actually goes on in software engineering, understanding the underlying phenomena. And so all of those things are advanced, we think, by making these courses available widely in law schools. And then finally, theoretical frontiers. It's been surprising to me how little literature there really is about the nature of legal documents from a computational point of view. And I've made some stabs on that. Again, I'll link to them. But one thing I find interesting is to think of a document automation environment as a network of texts and metatext, or text about texts. I won't say much more about it, but it's some really interesting network theory applied to the very words and documents that we live in and we kind of swim in as lawyers. And you can think of various ways to model the connections between the pieces in individual documents and across documents. And a second area I've been spending a lot of time in recent years is modeling choices, where you're not so much applying rules to reach decision, but you're doing a balancing test. And almost none of the document assembly platforms presently support that mode of reasoning very well. So I've gotten really interested in how do you build an auxiliary technology, kind of widgets that are optimized for helping people make balancing decisions. So as a existing lawyer or someone who's going into the profession, obviously you may have some concerns about where this is going in terms of the marketplace. There's been a lot of talk about the underemployment, unemployment of lawyers and other professionals as increasingly intelligent machines step in, not to mention machine-equipped providers from other parts of the world. And we've seen IBM's Watson now excel in Jeopardy, and we're starting to talk about Watson MD and Watson JD. Where's this all going? I'll just leave you with that thought that I think it lends more urgency than ever to paying attention to this technology, both as a tool for streamlining and turbocharging your practice, but as a way of turbocharging your head as a practitioner in this new world. So this slide, which will be part of the slides made available after the session, just gives you links to a variety of websites. Some of these, John, is included in your homework. These are big commercial corporate law firms that provide free online document assembly for clients and prospects of theirs. And they're great illustrations of the power of the tools that are out there. And you can also download actual software to create these for free from at least 3 or 4 of the vendors. play with it, learn it, understand it, see whether it's useful to you. The writings I mentioned, this Current Frontiers piece is from 2007. I think it's still pretty frontier-esque. That's available under this link. I recently had a short piece called Dancing in the Cloud, which talked about this collaborative form of document assembly and documents built for two and collaborative deliberation. The book John mentioned. And I was an editor of a recent book called Educating the Digital Lawyer, which is a look at this from the legal education context. Last slide is just links more about me. If you want to follow me or read about me, you can go there. John.
Mark. Mark, that was excellent. Thank you so much. We have lots of questions popping in, and we have time for a few of them. So I'll just run through these. First one. Do you know of any document automation tools that work with OpenOffice or LibreOffice?
I actually don't. Not that are really, very sophisticated. I mean, there's some efforts I've heard about to do open source document automation platforms, but I can't cite any.
Yeah, I don't know of any either, and I've been looking hard for a while. There isn't a lot of work that I know of in open source in this space. Is that pretty much your observation as well?
Yep, that's been my observation.
Do any of these document creation programs work on tablets as well as the desktop or laptops?
Yeah. Well, certainly if your tablet supports a browser, you can get to many of these as a user.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them have forms of online authoring as well. So you can do some template creation as well as template utilization. But that's a frontier a lot of the vendors I think are aware of and anxious to cross quickly. So we're going to see rapid developments in the next few years on the tablets and smartphones for that matter.
Mm-hmm. I have a question that was entered in near the top. What about Macs? My suspicion is that for a long time law firms were PC or Windows centric, although that's changing.
Mm-hmm.
And that the new raft of document assembly announcements that I saw a couple weeks ago from Rocket Matter and Clio were web-based, and so therefore browser-based, and so
right.
The operating system is becoming less of an issue, at least in the new cycle of entries.
That's right. Although some of the main players like HotDocs still remains, if you want to author, you need to be in Windows. So for many years I was running a parallel version of Windows on my MacBook in order to accomplish that.
Yep, I could see. Which document assembly platforms master as well non-English documents? The example here is in German.
Yeah, I think, John, the answer there is almost all do now. Most support Unicode, so they've become almost language independent. As far as being able to handle documents in any language, and increasingly to have the interface itself be expressed in any localized language.
Cool. Are state and federal courts using document creators?
Yeah, for sure. Feel free to answer that yourself.
I know that there are court assistance offices that are creating automated document front ends using A to J author for self-represented litigants. So the answer to that is yes on that front. Not so much that are aimed at lawyers though, although the interesting work that's being done there is attempts to link case management systems or document assembly systems into e-filing.
That's right.
And that's hard because the world, as we're going to learn when Jim McMillan from the National Center for State Courts, I think he's next week, talks. E-filing is quite a scattered and messy landscape even today. So, but that's where it's headed. Is why can't we just go to a website, generate the document, and then instead of having to print it and then walk it into the court, say e-file it right at that moment? I mean, what I find good about this is now we have a vision for what we want. We didn't even have that before.
Mm-hmm.
But now comes the time to build it.
Exactly. I mean, one fascinating question there, John, is will eventually e-filing interactions with courts dispense with the necessity of any kind of document, in quotes, at all? Because you have some interface that gathers information, decisions, and assertions, and right now we turn it into a document for the sake of seeing it physically and filing it and retrieving it.
Yes, the document is just a data transfer format.
It's sort of like a temporary conduit. So you really want the information and the claims and counterclaims and arguments to be nested inside of a court information system, and the document may become a relic of the past at some point in the court world. Not in the next decade or two, I don't think, though.
Right. It's almost like paperless billing, right? The only reason we get receipts and bills is so that we can file them, but really we could generate them any time we want by going to the website and looking at the order.
Just kind of a convenient format for us humans to consume the information content.
Always an interesting question. How much do these platforms cost?
Wide range. Yeah. I mean, for a small firm, I mean, on the low end, you can get a copy of Hot Docs for a few $100s, and with some investment of your time, be up and running and tapping into this technology. You can get tools like Pythagoras, which is a quite robust application, even less expensively. And the prices range, frankly, from a few $100s to a few $100,000 to get set up with different forms of these vendors' products.
Mm-hmm. I think the ones that contain practice-specific content, essentially automated form books, would be more expensive because they serve a smaller audience and they're a practice in a box sort of thing, right?
Exactly. I think it's very market dependent. So for some jurisdictions, someone may have built a whole family law practice system. If they've got enough customers, they can be very price competitive. And certainly in most cases, it's much less expensive for you as a practitioner to buy already programmed expertise and documents than try to reconstruct it yourself or to practice without it.
So that's interesting. So people coming into this have to make a buy or build decision. Or should I buy a tool and build my own practice, or should I buy a form package and either edit on top of that, or just use that, trusting that the lawyers who created it did a good enough job? Absolutely.
And the buying choices now are kind of scattered and hard to find, but I think there's enough growth in this industry that the choices are going to get richer. But inevitably, that's going to be facing everyone. Here's how I practice. Here's the nature of my work. Here's what I like to be able to do. What can I acquire already built by somebody else by buying or borrowing or negotiating? And then how do I customize it to my practice?
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, we're as naturally happens as we answer questions, more and more are piling in, and we're running out of time. And so I'm going to just pick one last question here, and we'll put these into the wiki and try to answer them. Mark, I'll be happy to lend a hand if I can. So if you were to build these into a skills-based curriculum, would it be wiser to examine existing document assembly tools or the new frontiers? And then when I hear that question, it's the difference between the download and install versus the web-based software as a service tools. And I don't know the answer. I think you have to use what's out there now, because that's what people will graduate into using.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a classic answer is rather than either or, it's a both and. I think courses in this should engage students in learning real world, present day technologies that they can acquire and have in place for their own practice tomorrow. But it should also cover the frontiers, because that's where the intellectual fascination and the stimulating possibilities are most present. So a course really needs to bundle both aspects.
All right, I just have to grab this last question. How does learning software development, how is that going to help a student going into practice? The person writes, I understand the importance to see the underlying logic, but in terms of getting students ready to use tools, do they have to be ready? Let me modify that question. Do we have to teach lawyers to be programmers?
It's a controversial stance, but my answer is yes. I think that the lawyer of today and the near future inevitably needs to be a programmer of some sort. And we may have less off-putting words to describe it, but we need to be engaged in our tools not simply as victims and users, but as proactive participants. And to be effective, to be competitive, you need to be an informed consumer of the tools you buy and a competent adjuster of those tools to suit your practice. So I think it's pretty inescapable. People can't really expect to be a lawyer in the modern world much longer without being knowledgeable about these tools.
Excellent. All right. Well, we're getting close to the top of the hour, and so I'm gonna thank Marc for his fantastic presentation. That was exactly what I was hoping for, and I learned a lot from that. So thank you very much, Marc. Let me go over the homework for assignment 2. It's now linked in from the blog and from the wiki. So as you did in your first homework, you created 2 lists of 5 things, and so I want you to step back for a moment and realize that what did we collectively do? Well, 100 of you created essentially 500 items on a list, and 100 of you went out and found 3 definitions of virtual lawyering or e-lawyering. Now, granted, an awful lot of you found the same things. That's bound to happen. But collectively, we created an amazing and enormously valuable resource that we could then go back over again and maybe cull into a top 100 or a top 50 or something like that. So I want you to realize that we're trying to design these homeworks in a way that not only benefits you in the doing and in the going over of the material, but also benefits you in seeing other people's work, and other people who didn't take the class will see your work both individually and collectively on into the future. That's the spirit of the MOOC. That's very Wikipedia-like philosophy that I've got going, and I hope that you understand it and are willing to contribute to it. So your homework is to make two lists of 5 things, at least 5, benefits, advantages that you can see from using or understanding document automation, and pitfalls, problems, barriers to document automation. I thought that was wonderful that Marc found an example of if you program an error, even a logic error, into a document assembly system, then every document created from that system will have that error because the machines are dumb. The machines do what we tell them to do. The second part of the homework assignment is a little trickier. You're going to visit some websites and run through a couple of automated document interviews as though you were an attorney working on a document for a client. Marc was kind enough to find these places and to warn the folks that we might be sending hordes of students there. You have to enter fake information, so please be respectful, about your choice of fake names and addresses. We're invited guests there. Don't make us look bad. Fill out the forms, or don't just fill out the forms from start to finish. Go back and forth, change your choices. Notice that when you change choices, different paths are either opened up to you or closed off to you based on those choices. To me, the ability to program branching or a decision tree into the software is a key function of capturing lawyer or legal expertise, and you don't see it except through what path you're able to take from a user standpoint. So I want you to think about that and what it would take to create systems like that. Marc did mention that in order to build systems like this, you can't just have surface knowledge of the law. You have to have a pretty deep understanding of not just one path to create one document, but the ability to create all possible documents. And that sort of understanding is an opportunity, in legal education, because you want students to have a broad-based, open-ended, need to be able to learn more knowledge. And the construction of document assembly systems there's a mirror, or there's an analogy to that. So we've gotten 3 websites there that you can see up on the homework link. If you run into problems, send us an email. But these aren't easy to do. This is a bit of a tricky assignment. It will take you 5, 10, 15 minutes for each one. But I urge you that if you want to get experience in how these look from the user viewpoint, this will give you a good example. The most likely thing that's wrong for running these is browser compatibility. So try a different browser. You should have Chrome, Firefox, and Internet Explorer installed on your computers anyhow, or in the case of Mac, Safari. So try a different link to see if that makes the problem go away. The second part of this is that once you've tried at least 2 of these systems, I want you to write a couple of paragraphs that capture your impressions. Pretend that you are a junior associate at a law firm, and you've been asked by the old non-tech savvy partner to check these out and report back. You're the tech savvy new associate. You need to teach the old school dude, who's unfamiliar with technology. He wants to know if this technology is worth further and deeper investigation, and whether it's worth the time and the training costs and the investment to create documents. So what do you say? I want you to post your short responses, and I emphasize short. These partner guys and ladies are busy folk, in your homework wiki. Just like law school, there is no wrong answer, but there are poorly reasoned arguments. So you need to describe and document your work, which is to say, if you do research on this and go out and find articles or blog posts that help you, put the links to those in your work. All right? Don't forget to put a -2 behind your name on the wiki homepage when you complete that, so that we know that you've done that. And I believe we are done for the day. So thank you very much. Next week, we will have Jim McMillan talking about the state of technology in the courts. We will be posting the recording of this up on the course blog as quickly afterwards as we can. It usually takes a couple of hours to process the video. And so thank you very much, and see you next week.